Evolution has yielded us some pretty interesting skills. Sure, as a species, we've been telling oral histories for tens or even hundreds of thousands of years, but this pales in comparison to the amount of time that we've been hunting and gathering. Our brains and our bodies developed over millions of years of roaming the savanna, looking for areas with food and scoping out different types of nuts and berries and interacting with all the different types of critters we found along the way. Why does this matter? Well, it means that we can not only spot an approaching predator very quickly, we can also remember visual information or pictures far faster and with more clarity than we can remember things like spoken words. This skill is super useful if you, as a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer, need to remember where you saw that herd of buffalo going, or what that berry looked like that made everyone really, really sick. Because of this evolutionary development, visual information is simply easier to recall than auditory information. It also has to do with the fact that pictures are more heavily encoded and they speak to different types of working memory buffers, as we mentioned before. Pictures are imbued with rich and detailed information, such as color, context, shape, and size, and they're more likely to have a higher number of neural connections as they convey emotion and depth, interaction, and so much more. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Visual information is also alarmingly fast. Research has demonstrated that we can comprehend the contents of an image in just a fraction of a second. To demonstrate this, I want to walk you through an exercise. I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm going to show you this picture for a pretty long time, 2 whole seconds. And I want you to try and understand as much detail as you can about it. What are the people doing? How are they feeling? What is the context? Are you ready? Now, you just saw that picture for a pretty short amount of time, but I bet if I asked you to, you could write me at least a paragraph about the colors and the composition, where things were laid out, and what the meaning and significance of the photo is. Perhaps you could even write 2 paragraphs. Or maybe, if you're a particularly good writer, you could describe it in 3 paragraphs of 1,000 words. Ultimately, a photo is just information, and what you just did is the equivalent of reading information at something on the order of 30,000 words per minute. That's 3 times faster than the world record speed reader. Look at you, you evolved person, you. It's totally amazing. This little demonstration shows us just how effective it is to see things as pictures and symbols rather than auditory information. For this reason, in addition to all the other steps we have to take to prime our memory, it's best that we also learn to transform concepts, ideas, and other important information into imagined visual pictures, or what we call markers, as soon as we possibly can. It won't surprise you to learn, additionally, that the best and most memorable types of visual markers are strange, bizarre, or emotionally connected to memories. After all, adult learners need to connect information to pre-existing knowledge, and as always, our hippocampi are busy working away to determine what stuff matters and what stuff doesn't. The same is true of images we're hoping to remember. But we'll be covering that in a little bit more detail soon. For now, I want to tell you a pretty interesting story that actually happened while I was building the original version of this course. I was chatting with a neuroscientist from Austria about the process of learning and neural networks and things like that. More specifically, we were discussing the process of learning languages and why it was that she was struggling so much to learn new vocabulary words. The conversation progressed towards the various different ways to learn and what types of things she found easier or more difficult to remember. It was then that she recanted a story to me from when she was in med school, long before she started to understand how the brain functions. Now apparently, one of her first tasks was to memorize all of the bones in the human body, which is a pretty momentous task. She explained to me that she struggled a great deal with this first memorization assignment. This was because they were simply looking at the bones in a diagram, a very undetailed image in a textbook without any emotional connection or experiential component to it. She said she struggled and struggled, but then one of the next assignments she had was to memorize all of the ligaments in the human body. Now this may sound even more daunting because there are over 900 tiny little ligaments throughout the entire body. However, the way that they learned that as a class was by dissecting a cadaver top to bottom. She told me, quote, "I promise you, I'll never forget a single ligament in the human body." Now, one thing that really caught my attention is how she described the experience. She told me, "Those images will never leave my mind." Now, I think it's important to draw a conclusion from this, and it's important to realize that in both situations, both the textbook with the bone diagrams and the cadaver, there were images involved. However, the detailed, experiential images, the emotionally significant experience of interacting with a dead body, and the very concrete, minute details are what allowed her to memorize the ligaments much better than the bones. This is actually a really interesting segue because in the next sessions, we're going to be talking about what types of images are poignant and most memorable. We're also going to talk more about how we can better store images laced with significance and meaning to improve the chances that they end up in our long-term memory. But before we do all that, we suggest checking out some of the recommended materials in the PDF syllabus for some really awesome podcasts, some great books, and some inspiring TED Talks that describe the amazing power of visual memory.